I sat on the cold, dark granite counter, my heart filled with anger and sorrow. This was the act I was forbidden to do as a child. But now, it has become a witness to the emotional entanglement between me and my lover. Chapter 36. I wrapped my arms around my legs, pulling them up close to my chest as I rest my head down onto my knees, letting out a quiet sniffle as I glared down at the cold dark granite counter that I was seated on as if it were the smooth surface that had done something to anger me. There was something about sitting on a counter. They were just so much more fun than regular chairs. Or perhaps they were for me since I'd always been told not to as a child. I buried my face into the fluffy material of my pajamas. After what had happened, I knew Alaricus would have a hard time leaving me alone. The urge to comfort an upset mate was overwhelming, and Alaricus, even without the instinct, was overbearingly protective. I'd snuck up to my room, changing out of the still damp leggings and dress into my favorite pair of pajamas, a soft comforting cream color with pictures of hot cocoa in a red cup and red candy canes printed all over it. Although I had no doubt it wouldn't be long before Alaricus found me, I hadn't expected it to be so very soon. "Amara," he called out softly in his deep velvety voice, letting out a quiet breathy sigh in relief. I suppose he thought I'd run off. I stay in my spot, not even giving him a slight sign of acknowledgement, but I can feel the hair at the back of my neck rise as I hear him creep closer. "I'm so sorry, Angel. I didn't mean to upset you," he says gently, his longing to reach out and touch me almost tangible in the air. My brows furrow at his words. That's what he was upset about. Upsetting me. Nearly killing a man invoked absolutely no feelings of remorse or regret. Is that all you're upset about? Turning to face him, and his honey eyes gaze all over my face, widening in remorse. "Amara, it's difficult for me to see somebody else touching you, especially unmated males. I know it's wrong, but it awakens something within that I can't control, despite how in control I may be. For you, I'm like a newborn pup again. Everything I know goes out the window and I'm back on my primal instincts. I love you, and I am so sorry about the way that I acted tonight. You deserve so much more than a man who'd act this way. I promise, Angel, I'll be better for you." Alaricus says softly, "You need to apologize to the tutor." And he nods, a small smile coming onto his face as I nod once. Attempting to act stern, he sneaks forward as I concentrate on the edges of my pajama shirt, twiddling it softly in my fingers. A strong muscled arm snapped gently around my waist, one making its way under my knees as Alaricus yanks me off the counter and onto his chest. "Alaricus," I squeal out, clinging onto the collar of his shirt. "Yes, baby," he coos softly, pulling me up closer to his chest, leaning down to nuzzle his face against the soft skin of my throat. Inhaling deeply, "I kinda really like the counter," I say awkwardly, and Alaricus pulls away from my throat, mumbling something under his breath that sounds suspiciously like I'm being cheated on with a counter. He looks at me with his bottom lip jutted out, hazel eyes widened in a way that remind me of a newborn puppy. "More than me?" he asks sadly. No, I don't like a counter more than you. I just kinda like sitting there," I say, and he mutters something under his breath again. But this time it sounds quite like that can be arranged, and he puts me down onto my feet. He hops onto the counter, leaning his back against the wall, before he reaches out for me, wrapping his hands tightly around my waist and yanking me up so that I sit in front of him between his legs. That was how one of the Pooh younger chefs find us. The most powerful alpha werewolf sitting with his legs spread out, and his mate sitting pressed against his chest. She lets out a shrill scream, and I feel Alaricus wince as the high-pitched noise hits his sensitive ears. He buries his face into my hair, trying to hide away from the noise. Sorry, cyanide, miss. Winters, I had no idea you two were in here," she says, panting slightly, as she hurriedly bows before running back out. And I stare after her wide-eyed. That was significantly awkward. "Do you think she's gonna tell anyone?" "Tell what?" Alaricus asks, nuzzling his face into my hair. "That the almighty Alaricus has gone insane and is cuddling with his mate on a random kitchen counter," I retort, eliciting a quiet chuckle from him that shakes me as it rakes through his chest. I could always hunt her down, scare her into never uttering a word about the almighty wolf who's gone absolutely insane for his sweet little mate. Alaricus whispers into my ear, nicking gently at the skin. Tea, that probably won't be necessary, and is probably more wrong, I say, and he shakes his head side in a come see I come motion. I should have asked her to make us hot cocoa. Alaricus groans out suddenly and I wrinkle my nose. She seemed terrified. It's best you didn't. Plus we can make some, I say, scrambling to get off the counter, but he winds his arm tightly around my waist. I'd rather just hold you than have hot cocoa, Alaricus mumbles, trailing kisses down the soft skin of my throat. His tongue dots out a gently lick over the conjunction between my collarbone and throat. I flinch slightly as I feel something smooth and hard press against the skin, and he pulls away from my throat. Turning around to look at him, I see his hazel eyes glinting gold, canines peeking out from his usual perfect teeth. He squeezes his eyes shut, trying to shake away the urge, but the longing in his eyes was impossible to miss. The primal longing of a wolf to mark their mate. I was slightly curious as to why he'd never brought it up. Eros had, but Alaricus had never. You want to mark me? I breathe out, my brain not even registering my words before they leave my lips. I'd become so very comfortable with Alaricus I no longer felt the need to keep my thoughts to myself. It was as if my brain sensed he was a safe place. I could tell him absolutely anything. Amara, do you know about the mark of a mate? He asks me softly, after taking a moment to rein in his control again. I shake my head at him, turning in his arms so that I'm looking at him. The mating mark can be a wonderful thing. It binds the two together, but not as most believe. For wolves, it allows each to sense the other's pain. The bite of your mate awakens when something within your wolves binds them together in a sense that allows one to feel if the other is in danger, allows them to feel their extreme emotions, share it amongst each other. And, of course, to many wolves the physical bit means no other will approach your mate. But for us, it'll only be physical. Since you do not have a wolf, it'll only be my claim on you for others to see, since you would not be able to bite me in a way that would not heal. For us it wouldn't have that additional emotional layer, that emotional connection, and physically is not the way I wish to claim you. I want to own your heart, so that another man could never even hope to be its owner. I want to be in your every thought so that another's words to impress you do not even hinder you in the slightest. I want to leave my traces on your skin, but in the sweetest of ways. That'll torment you only in my absence. I never want to hurt you. Marking you would only hurt you, taint your beautiful soft skin. And for what? For others to see you bear my mark. For me to leave my physical print on you. I never wished to do that. I couldn't live with myself if I were to hurt you. I love you so much, Angel. I could never hurt you, he says softly, and I twist completely in his arms, wrapping my arms tightly around his neck and hugging him to me. Thank you, I mumble into his neck, and he wraps his arms tightly around me, pulling him into me. He asks softly, for being a honey wolf, I say, and he laughs, somehow understanding I meant sweet. I did absolutely anything for you, Angel. You never need to thank me. You repay me for everything by simply being, he says softly. A buzzing sounds from his right pocket, making me jump, and he looks at me apologetically as he pulls away, pulling out his phone from his pocket. The soft look on his face hardens as he listens to what the person says, his eyes darting to me, and I look up at him wide-eyed, but he looks down, avoiding eye contact. I will be right out. Ending the call, he quickly typed up a quick message to someone, shoving his phone back in his pocket before I could even get a peek. Jumping off the counters, he turns towards me, wrapping his hands around my hips firmly and hoisting me off the counter, placing me securely on my feet. Amara, I need to tend to something. I'll be back soon. And I stare at him baffled. You need to tend to what? It's just regular pack stuff. I'll be right back, I promise, Angel. Alaricus, you look worried. You can tell me. I reach for his hand, rubbing my thumb over the large expanse of the back of his hand. It's not about me, Amara. But you're right, you should know. he says, sighing slightly. We don't have much time, so just humor me. Just this once, my love, he says, and I nod. Despite my confusion, I don't mutter a word as he hoists me up into his arms, simply closing my eyes as I feel my hair fly back, to avoid motion sickness. In his hurry, it wasn't efficient to use the usual human speed, one that I had doubts he only used due to my presence. I hear a door open and he places me down on my feet, the soft skin of the soles of my feet sinking into the familiar carpet of my room. Get dressed, Angel, he says, and I nod, scurrying into my closet, swapping out the pajamas I'd worn for a sweater and jeans, before hurrying back out to him. He holds the coat I'd left on my chair a few days ago in his hands, and I turn my back to him, allowing him to help me into it. Before I'm back in his arms, my face digging into the soft material of his shirt as he takes us outside. Alaricus sets me down on my feet, and I open my eyes to see we are right outside the castle, near the large black gate, and his guards are staring at him incredulously. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Would you like us to watch over the Miz as you handle the matter? One dares to ask. No, she will stay with me. She is going to be going with us, Alaricus says firmly, and the man nods, mumbling an apology to the both of us quietly as he backs away from us, his head bowed. Amara, I need you to listen to me, and I know you're brave, but love, I need you to really keep it together for this. I want us to be there as soon as possible, he says as he leads me towards the cars that are lined up before the gate, opening the back door of one he helps me in, and I scoot over to make room for him as he gets in. Roll up the petition, he says quickly to the driver, who nods, frantically fumbling to do as Alaricus says, and though normally I would scold Alaricus for his impolite manners, I stay quiet as the petition rolls up. There was a bit of a rebellion at your old pack, and the offender was a co-worker of your father's. The alpha of the pack had all houses searched, of all the people acquainted with the man, now with good reason I'm sure. Your mother was a bit reluctant to let in the pack warriors. She began to get upset when they forced their way in. And when your father came home from work to see a warrior pushing past your mother into the home, and leaving her on the floor, he became very upset. The warriors became physically violent with your father, but there's nothing to worry about. I've sent my best human doctor there, and your father merely has a nose fracture. The alpha is at your parents' home and we are going there now, to resolve this all. He finishes as his eyes darting around my face to assess my reaction, and as my eyes begin to water he goes to wrap his arms around me, but I lean towards the partition, knocking on it, and the driver rolls it down quickly. Dock faster, please, I say quietly, and the man mumbles a quiet yes, man, before the car lurches forward. Amara, my love, I'm so sorry, Alaricus says. It wasn't you who hurt them, I mumble quietly, refusing to look into the honey gaze that stares at me ever so intently, and he wraps his arms around me. Undoing my seatbelt, he pulls me into his lap, setting me down so that I'm facing him. We're going to handle this. I'm going to speak to the Alpha, see to it that those warriors are punished while you comfort your parents. Any punishment you and your parents deem fit will be given, I assure you. Right after this is all over, I am going to hold a meeting, and I am going to put an end to the mistreatment of humans. I swear to you, Angel. But right now what's most important is your parents. His husky, velvety voice sincere, honey eyes sympathetic but completely honest. The car comes to a slow stop and I look away from his gaze out the window to see my old home, stumbling off of his lap. I yank open the door, startling the driver who is coming around to open it, but he stares at me bewildered, but I pay him no heed as I run towards the door. Alaricus hot on my heels. His arm wraps around my waist and he tugs me back into his firm warm chest as we reach the door, my feet barely touching the ground as he holds me close to him, the rhythmic movements of his chest moving me along with them as I pant, blowing my hair out of my face. Breathe, Angel. You need to be calm and in control to comfort your parents. He whispers into my ear, his hot breath caressing my cold skin. Okay. I answer, breath ILY, raising my arm to knock on the door. As Alaricus sits me down, I a wave of DJ by hitting me. The amount of times I'd done this as a child. Along with age, the worry of a tragedy awaiting me on the other side increasing. The door is swung open, and there stands my mother, her beautiful curly hair in complete disarray and larger than usual. "My baby's home," she exclaims loudly as she throws herself into my arms, hugging me tightly to her chest, the familiar motherly warmth calming my racing heart. "How's Papa?" I ask as she pulls away. "Fine, it's." She starts coming to an abrupt stop as her eyes land on the man who stands behind me, absolute horror filling them at our usual proximity. When I'd last come here, my parents had of course asked me if I was comfortable, but never about my relationship with Alaricus, although of course my answer would have differed from what it would currently be. "Mom, you remember Alaricus, as I'm sure you remember my mother," I say, turning so I can see him too. And he nods, sending a small polite smile to my mother, who looks about near fainting as she sees his smile. Cyanide," she stutters out, but he shakes his head. "Please, call me Alaricus, Mrs." he says, and she clamps her mouth shut, nodding. "So Mom, how's Papa? How are you?" I ask again as she turns over to me, looking torn between pulling me away from Alaricus or dealing with the matter at hand. Our farewells hadn't been pretty during my last visit. It had been nearly impossible to convince her to let me go back. She'd been dead set on helping me escape to the Freelands. Despite what I told her, she'd always despised werewolves, and even more so the most powerful one of them all, my Alaricus. "I'm fine. Your father, he's going to be fine. They just fractured his nose. His jaw is broken and they bruised him up a little," she says, tears brimming her beautiful large eyes, and she slaps her hand over her mouth to avoid sobbing before the werewolves outside and inside of her home. "Amora," a deep voice says from behind my mother, and I look away from my mother, my eyes widening as I see the large build of my previous alpha, a gigantic stern man. He'd always kept his interactions with the humans of his pack to a minimum, instead sending the warrior-ranked wolves to deal with us. I was surprised he knew my name, although I suppose being the most powerful wolf's mate may have been a contributing factor. Normally the alpha of the pack wouldn't come to deal with what he calls such a trivial matter, but I suppose since it was the parents of Alaricus' knight's-mate, the cause was deemed worthy of his interference. "Cyanide," he acknowledges, bowing his head down ever so slightly before he turns to me, looking in my direction but not quite making eye contact. "How have you been?" And I blink up at him rapidly. Had he ever known how was that he was asking now? I answer bluntly and he nods, rolling his lips in at my response. "Mom, let's go inside," I say, and she nods, hurriedly ushering us into the home and out of the cold. Her eyes settling on Alaricus, and she looks a bit uneasy as he enters our home, but she stays quiet. We sit down in the small living room, Alaricus wrapping his arm around my waist and pulling me close to him as we sit ourselves down on the couch, making my mom's eyes widen. I turn to Alaricus, giving him a stern look, but he tilts his head, looking absolutely confused. Right, the wolf pup had no idea what was wrong with showing affection to his mate. I squeeze the hand that rests on my hip, pulling it off my waist gently, but keeping his hand in mine and giving it a discreet, reassuring squeeze before I get off the couch and make my way to where my mom sits. Settling beside her, I wrap my arm around her shoulder, rubbing my hand up and down her arm. "Mom, tell me what happened. Where's Papa?" "Your father is upstairs. The doctor gave him some pain medication, and the Lord knows the both of you and no chance against any meds. He knocked out like a newborn the sec and they went down his throat," she says, rolling her eyes despite the situation, making me let out a giggle that has a small smile coming on her flushed face. But the smile drops quickly. "You might remember George. He worked with your father. He decided he'd had enough of all this, and he attacked the Alpha's home. He hurt the youngest daughter of the Alpha before the warriors caught up. But George escaped, and now the warriors were checking all the houses. But you know I really don't like those bast," she starts, but a loud growl from the Alpha stops her. But a snarl from Alaricus has the Alpha shutting up quite quickly. I give Alaricus an appreciative nod, and he winks at me from the corner of his eye, still holding his glare at the Alpha. I didn't want to let them in, after what they'd done to us that night, and I tried to stop them from coming in. Her voice begins to crack and I rub her back, gently getting up to grab her a glass of water. Walking to the kitchen, I grab a glass from the cabinet I'd so often reached for. One that when I was younger seemed impossibly high. Sometimes when I'd stand glaring up at it pouting, my father would come from behind me, hoisting me onto his shoulders and lifting me so that I was eye level with the cabinet, and we'd laugh, trying to be quiet so my mother wouldn't hear. She was always afraid he'd drop me. She thought it was crazy to pick the child up to the cabinet, instead of simply grabbing a glass. But it was my father's way of teaching me, if you couldn't get what you wanted in one way, try another. Try until you get what you want. I remember once he'd stood behind me rooting for me as I tried to climb my way up to the cabinet. My mother had been out that day. I filled the glass up with water, taking it back to my mother, who tried to give me a weak smile in gratitude as I handed it to her. Feeling Alaricus, eyes bore into my back. "You okay now, Mama?" I ask and she nods, leaning in to kiss my cheeks softly. I was resistant and didn't let them in. They said they didn't have much time, but I refused, so one got impatient. He pushed me out of the way and I lost my balance. I fell and they stepped over me to get in. That was around the time your father gets home. He'd seen them push past me and was furious. You know your father, he gets a little protective. He rushed in, and he grabbed the one that had pushed me, pulling him back by his jacket and punching him. The warriors didn't take well to that. They pushed him back, but that wasn't enough. They decided he needed to be punished. They kept punching him in his face. Turns out they fractured his nose and broke his jaw. I yelled at them to stop, but the other one held me back. Your father started to get more worked up when he saw my struggles, and then his asthma kicked in and he had an attack. It took them a while to realize what was going on, and it was almost too late when they allowed me to go get his inhaler and his EpiPen. I called the doctor, and he checked him over. Soon after, the doctor and a few guards from the palace arrived. That doctor just finished with your father before you arrived. Your father, he's fine now. I just can't believe I nearly lost him. Just a few more moments and I don't know what would have happened. She rambles quickly, and I struggle to follow, her eyes glazing over with tears as she swallows thickly, making tears prick my own eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mama," I say, wrapping my arms around her shoulders and hugging her to me. "Where are those warriors?" Alaricus growls out, startling my mother, and I rub her back gently, turning to the alpha, who looks like a deer caught in headlights. They're being punished accordingly," the alpha says, his voice unsure and cracking slightly. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Winters will decide if it's fair or not. I want them here, in the next 20 minutes, or they won't be the only ones. Decisions will be made about tonight. Do I make myself clear?" Alaricus asks, and the alpha nods frantically. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," he squeaks out, before trying again in a deeper voice. "Let's have them castrated, physically and then chemically, just to really finish the job, and the slight remains." I mumble under my breath, twiddling with my fingers, but I look up to see 3 pairs of eyes gazing at me, horrified to more than the last. I was thinking more along the lines of solitary confinement, or time in the dungeons, but it is solely up to your family," Alaricus says, looking quite uncomfortable, and I nod, pressing my lips together. "I'll get the men," the alpha says. "Amara, I'm going to check on your father," my mother says, a tear trailing down the soft skin of her cheek as she gets up, and my heart clenched at the pain in her voice. I knew they were sick of living this way. My mother was a wild one at heart, rebellious. Running away to the free lands had always been a dream of hers. Deep down, if the way her eyes would spark up when she told me stories as a child were any hint. Upon meeting my father, her dream had become secondary to her love for him. When she'd become pregnant with me, her dream had been buried deep down. One couldn't plan an adventure that risky with a child. But now they didn't have a child to worry about, and they had the most powerful wolf on their side. "Alaricus," I say suddenly, only now realizing he stood in the corner of the room on the phone, but upon hearing my voice he shut the phone immediately. giving me his undivided attention. What is it, Angel? Are you all right? Covering the distance between us at an incomprehensible speed. Kneeling down before me, he takes my hands in his. I'm all right, Alaricus, thank you for supporting my mother. I say, and he nods, mumbling a quiet of course, pressing a kiss to the back of my hand. I need you to do something for me. I say, and he looks up, staring at me intently. Alaricus, I need you to help my parents get to the free lands. I say, and his honey eyes widen at my words. He stares at me as if I've gone insane. Amara, do you even understand what you ask of me? I do. I really do. The free lands are no joke. Werewolves aren't allowed there. The wolves involved in the system stay out of there. That is how the peace is maintained. If your parents go there, neither my guards nor I could ever go there. Or there will be rebellions everywhere. Wars will break out. This means you could never see your parents again. And communication in the free lands is prohibited. They've ensured no one from inside can contact someone on the outside and vice versa. Angel, you'd never hear from them again. They wouldn't be allowed to come back once they've left. You don't understand that this means you never see or speak to your parents again. I understand that. But it's what's best. It's what they need. They don't deserve to be pestered this way, to spend the rest of their lives in this fear. I retort, trying to sound strong, but a tear leaks from my filled eyes, and he swiped at it gently with his thumb, capturing the second by gently pressing his lips against it. They can come live with us in the palace. No one would dare pester them there. You know it. I'd rip their lungs out if they did. You know that? Alaricus says. You think I hadn't thought of that possibility, because I have. But don't you see how much they despise werewolves? They're deathly afraid of you. And Alaricus, you're amazing, and I see that. But they don't. Did you see the way my mother looked at you? They wouldn't ever want to live in that palace. And asking that of them would be so selfish of me. I see you for who you are. But to them you are the most powerful of the species that took away their dream of having a large family, that took away their baby, and permanently injured my mother and scarred their only daughter. Wolves have taken away their freedom, their rights to equality, and you're the most powerful, meaning you'd have condoned it. They'd never want to live in the palace. They deserve freedom. They deserve equality. I say, cupping his jaw in my hand, rubbing my thumb into his cheek gently, and he looks at me perplexed. But I could speak to the alphas. I could threaten you, old alpha. You saw him, he's terrified of me. Alaricus rise, but I shake my head. That change is important, and I'm so glad you're making it. But it could take a long time. They need to be away from this now. The alpha may change some rules, but the mistreatment of humans won't just disappear. The way the wolves see them won't just disappear, or vice versa. That will take time. Time my parents don't have. My father's health will deteriorate here. I know it will. He's so protective, he'll hate knowing that wolves can harm my mom, and he's helpless against it. It'll kill him. Please, Alaricus, I am begging you to do this for me. I've weighed out the options, and this is the only way. I say pleadingly. Amara, I'd do anything for you. But this way, you won't see them. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. As much as I hate to put it this way, you'll be stuck with me forever. I love you so much, but I'd hate for you to feel helpless, as if you have absolutely no option. This affects you too. You could never go to the free lands. Rogues aren't plagued by the ideas of war. If they caught wind that my mate had gone to the free lands, they'd follow you. That could cause apocalyptic destruction. I'd be compelled to come there to protect you. And I'm the one most definitely banned from there. This would leave you with no option. He says, and my heart clenches at his words. I'm never going to leave you. I couldn't. I don't need the option. Please do this for me. And he nods. Anything for you, Angel. He mumbles, pressing a warm kiss to my forehead. Chapter 37, Alaricus POV. Her front teeth dig softly into the succulent tread-bottom lip as she turns the page, her nose twisting to the side audibly as she sniffles. A soft dark tendril of hair escaping the messy bun atop her head, and curving gently to the side of her face. for it knew not to disturb the masterpiece that was her faith. A deep sigh escapes me, my lips curving upwards as I watch her read, her eyes dancing with the emotions that passed through her with the turn at each page. For once in my life my mind was completely silent. Nothing to plague us. How she had become my very peace I didn't know. But she had. The little angel had somehow become my everything, and I was unable to stop it. Tears fill up her eyes, tiny pearl-like droplets decorating the brims of her eyes and dampening the lashes as they escape their confines. The tears trail slowly over the soft fair skin of her cheeks, leaving a slight shine in their wake, that disappears soon after. I despised it when she cried. For days after her parents' departure her eyes had been puffy and it was unbearable. She'd lie, to comfort me, promising she was just not sleeping well, that she hadn't cried, but she couldn't hide it from me. Stepping out of the shadows in which I stand, I make my way to where she sits, in her favorite corner of the large library. My quiet little hold up on the large armchair. My arms find their way under her small form and I lift her off the seat. A soft gasp escaping her as she turns her head to look at me. Big chocolate brown eyes stare at me, widened in surprise as I sit myself down in the chair, gently resting her small fan into my lap. The slight pressure of her resting on my body sending my heart into a frenzy, but also passing a wave of serenity through me. I lean her comfortably against my chest. My heart clenches as she subconsciously curls into me, the soft curves of her molding to my large firm body. It were as if I was made to hold her, shaped just so that she would be most comfortable, crafted in a way perfect to fit her. My eyes travel from her big brown eyes to the book she holds in her hands, darting quickly over the words, dismay filling me as I realize what had brought tears to her beautiful eyes. The moronic main character had decided to miss his own parents just now. Would it be entirely unjust if I were to hunt down the author? Oh, angel, I murmur quietly, trailing the back of my hand gently against the delicate soft skin of her cheek, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Sad book, she sputters out, her cheeks reddening slightly as if there were ever anything she had to be embarrassed about before me. It's not the book, is it? I ask softly, and she bites into her bottom lip harshly, making me frown. She was going to tear the soft skin. I pry her lip out from between her teeth, leaning forward to capture her bottom lip between the two of mine. Sucking on it gently, I dart my tongue over it, my mind reeling with the taste of her lips. Pulling away from her mouth, I look into the doe eyes that stare up at me, my hands cupping her face gently, thumbs rubbing against the moisture that leaks from her eyes and spills onto her cheeks. Don't hold it in, love. Let it all out. It was your choice and for the best, but that doesn't mean you can't be saddened by it. I hate to see you cry, but I'd rather you let this out than carry it around with you, I say, and her bottom lip trembles as the tears that she had been trying to control spill down her cheeks. Her arms come around me and I wrap my own around her waist, holding her close to my chest. She buried her face into the material of my shirt, her tears soaking through it as her little body shakes with her sobs, making my heart drop. I feel my own eyes sting as I hold her. My sweet little angel. So very sad. But she didn't deserve to be sad. She deserved all the happiness in the world. It was always the sweetest of souls that faced the cruelest of torments. But I wouldn't let the world touch her. She was mine. My light. My salvation. My miracle. The world couldn't have her. It couldn't wrap its cruel reins around her and steal from her her very happiness, her innocence. This time I wasn't able to help it. There was nothing I could do to change what had saddened her so deeply, but there would never be another. No other woe would ever come near my Amara. My sweet angel, your parents are going to be so very happy in the free lands. You're so brave for what you did, my little love. So very brave. You never fail to surprise me with your actions. You do things incomprehensible to me. The good in you. Its depth is something otherworldly. Your parents are so proud of you. I am so proud of you. You hold the strength of a true warrior, Amara. I envy you for it. You're so much stronger than I am. I've never seen something like it. I love you so much. They love you so much. This was what was best. I'm sorry you have to be away from them, Angel. But at least they'll be happy. Free at last, I whisper into her ear, rocking her slightly in my lap. As I swing back and forth, slowly cradling her to my chest, she sniffles softly, looking up at me with watery doe eyes, her nose and lips still hidden in the material of my shirt. She was like a little kitten, absolutely adorable, but she had the strength of a tiger, the courage of a lion. I love you, she says, and my heart halts completely, breath hitching in my throat as I look into the shining depths of her chocolate eyes. My limbs falling loose, body completely numb. She loved me. The angel loved me. My vision nearly darkening with the burst of euphoria. My arms tighten around her waist as I lean down to capture her lips with mine, my heart trying to hammer its way through my chest, her words ringing in my ears. How very softly she'd said it. She'd nearly breathed it, as if it were the simplest of truths. My eyes close as her lips touch mine, my body coming back to life at her touch. My lips move with an uncontrollable fervor against hers, and I tilt my head to get better access to the decadent sweet nectar. My arms tighten further around her, trying to bring her impossibly closer. But it would never be enough. I wanted to be one with her. I didn't want me without her. I didn't want a part of me even to suffer the torment of being without her. For the first time in centuries, I feel as if I'm alive, as if I'm mortal. I can feel the blood pumping through my veins, the air pushing in and out of my lungs. She had become my very air, and the need for her was dire. My hands worm her soft curves and escapes her that has a growl ripping through my chest involuntarily. I lick over her plump lips, nibbling on them ever so gently, and she parts them for me slightly. Slipping my tongue in, a growled moan escapes me at the sweet taste of her. How was I to ever possibly stop kissing her, when she tasted so sweet, when her lips were so soft against mine, when the feel of her kiss was so very addictive? She licks against the bottom of my tongue hesitantly, and my mind spins as my fist clenched her sides. Careful not to be gripping her, she was tempting for her own good. Her soft little hands slip in between us, rubbing gently over my chest, the feel of her skin against mine consuming me completely. How did somebody as beautiful, as delicate as she love a monster like me? I'd never know. But I'd gotten as lucky as to receive her love, and I'd never let go. Her hands fist the material of my shirt, and she tugs, squirming a little. I pull away, her soft pants ringing in my ears. My absolute favorite sound, the sound of a heartbeat strong and from encountering my own. I press my forehead against hers. I love you, I mumble, my eyes filling with the overwhelming emotion that I felt. How could one person possibly feel all this? How could one person contain it? I loved her so much it consumed me entirely. It filled every bit of me, and I was so proud, for it was undoubtedly the best part of me. My love for her. It connected me to her in a way no one could ever take away from me. She held all power over me, but not even my angel could make me stop loving her. This connection to her would forever be unbreakable. Unable to control myself, I press kisses to the soft kin that stretches over the gentle curve of her jaw, trailing down the arch of her thin, elegant throat. The arch of it had tempted me from the very first moment I'd seen it. I'd wished to press kisses to it, suck on the soft fair skin. I sucked on the soft skin that connected her delicate throat to her bone, my eyes rolling to the back of my head at the taste of her. She was so very sweet. I pull away softly as her small hand cuts my jaw, and I realize she was trying to raise it, and I grant her wish, looking up into her eyes. You're crying, she mumbles, seemingly mystified. I'm not, I answer, and a small smile comes into her lips. Well, that's too bad. If you were crying, I would have kissed you to make you feel better. But I guess you're right, she says, and my eyes widen, as I shake my head quickly. I am. And a melodic giggle escapes her as she stretches up in my arms to press her lips to mine, not moving them, simply keeping them pressed against mine before pulling away. Much too quick. I try to ignore Eros' pleas for me to weep so that we'd earn ourselves some more kisses, but it's nearly impossible since I wanted to do the same thing. She pulls away, gazing up at me with her big brown eyes bright with happiness, and something that makes my heart clench. Love. Nobody had looked at me like that in centuries. I'd forgotten what it felt like. The warmth it provided to be looked at with eyes filled with love. To be looked at as if you mattered. As if you were something. There was a time that I craved this so badly I'd done horrible things to make people look at me as if I were something. But it wasn't with love to me. It was fear. It was as if I were death itself come to take them or their loved ones. But at least I was something. I'd never thought anyone could look at me this way, let alone the angel that sat in my lap, looking at me as if I were worthy. But truthfully I wasn't worthy of even a passing glance from her. Something so good, so innocent had to be miles above what I was. So far if she looked down she wouldn't even recognize me. I was absolute scum. I wish I were nothing, for it would be better than what I truly was. A monster. A beast. A heinous creature who'd committed unspeakable crimes. Eros whimpered softly in my head. But I ignored him. It wasn't fair for him to get to act like some innocent puppy just because our Amara was around. She had him on a leash. She had wounded a tight collar around my dark heart, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. Nothing I wanted to do about it. The dark strand fell from the confines of her bun. I smiled. Her hair was unruly, thick voluminous chocolate waves, so unlike the delicate angelic features they framed. It was a striking contrast, one that could leave me breathless. But what part of her couldn't? Every word, every touch, every glance drew me in. I found them all so very compelling. I found her so very compelling. She was so small, but she could make me bow before her. At times, I wanted to worship the masterpiece that was her. She'd become my shrine, my faith, my everything. A soft sigh escaped her parted lips as she tightened her small pale fists against the silk of my collar shirt, gripping it tightly in her hands. Leaning forward, she rested her soft cheek on my chest, her warm breath caressing the exposed skin atop the buttons, making my stomach clench. I wrapped my arms around the curve of her waist, pulling her in so she could comfortably nestle against me. "I love you," I whispered to her, in fervent hopes that she'd say it back. She sucks in a slight breath about to speak, and I close my eyes, hoping to trap the sound of her profession, the amount of times I'd imagined it, dreamt of it, but still it was nothing compared to how it truly sounded. The way her melodic voice delivered the sweet words, the smell of her fragrant breath as she spoke, the way her lips wrapped around each word. I could see them even with my eyes closed. Her voice seemed to form a caress around the words, making the simple statement sound so beautiful it stole my breath away. She loved me. Amara loved me. I wondered to myself how she could possibly love me, only realizing I voice my curiosity when she speaks. It was nearly alarming. I'd lived centuries. I had self-control. In the amount of years I'd lived, you master it. That she made me lose all control. She made me forget the countless painful years I lived. And with her I was a newborn once again. "How I love you," she asked softly, and I nodded hesitantly. "It's simple, really. It's like breathing. It's a part of me now. You're a part of me now. You found your way into my heart. And now you're in its every beat," she says, her eyes gleaming with honesty. She was telling the truth. She loved me. Not the way I loved her, surely. For she had so much more. More to love. More to hope. Whereas she was my everything. I had no love for myself. That portion of my heart belonged to her. My heart belonged to her completely, as did I. But it wasn't a worthy ownership. How I wished I was better. I'd spend the rest of my existence trying to be better for her. For the angel who resided in the very depths of me. In my every breath. Every beat of my heart. Every thought of my mind. Every word from my mouth. She was everything. But I too was something to her. It was a prestige I didn't deserve, but one I couldn't dare let go of. How was one to live if they'd found the most precious thing in the world only to lose it? I'd found her. And I couldn't let go. But her love, that was something I hadn't consciously dreamt of even in my wildest of fantasies, and now that I had it, I couldn't think of being without it. She made me feel the one thing that made a person mortal. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. An emotion I hadn't felt for centuries. She made me alive again. I feared losing her. I feared her getting hurt. I feared her being upset. And now I feared losing her love too. But how long could I hope to keep something I was unworthy of? I could trap the angel. But the angel's heart lay only within the confines of her ribcage, of her mind, and that I couldn't trap, that I didn't wish to trap. I didn't wish to control her, to tame her. I wished to run with her wilderness. But I was a hypocrite. I'd kept her with me when she didn't wish to be, something I would eternally mourn. And yet I wouldn't change it. I was a horribly selfish monster. But that's what kept her with me, and that was all that mattered to me. That's what kept her safe, and that was most important. More important than even her being with me. I was selfish, but when it came to her I was powerless. If it meant her well-being, I'd let her go. I'd let her go in just an instant. She could make me do absolutely anything she wanted. I'd cut myself into pieces if I knew it would please her even in the slightest. But she was far too kind, too good to take pleasure in such things. Knowing you were loved was an addicting feeling, and knowing it was the angel I worshipped who'd fallen in love with me was beyond words. I wished to hear it again and again, for her to never stop saying it, to look into those eyes, those warm chocolate-colored eyes that burned with love when she looked at me. Something would ignite within them when she looked at me. It had been happening for a while now, but I hadn't dared to assume something so seemingly impossible. A monster couldn't dare to dream of the angel falling in love with him. He would only end up getting hurt, become more broken than he already was. Perhaps that was my fate, to have earned her love only to lose it when I couldn't bear to live without it, when I'd just begun to understand the feeling, to come crashing down from a euphoric high that her profession had put me in, just like the many I'd brought crashing down, the many that had so much and I'd taken it all. Amara was my everything. If I were to ever lose her, surely my fate would be considerably worse than theirs, for I'd gladly choose death over ever losing her, over ever having her loathe me. I allow my hands their wish as they cup her dainty face between their rough callous grip, but very gently, for every part of me knew even subconsciously that she was the most precious thing we'd ever touch. Her skin so soft, like silk beneath my fingertips. I trail my thumb over her soft plump bottom lip, watching her cheeks redden with an endearing blush, making my mouth salivate to taste it. Leaning down, I press my lips to its offally, my mind numbing as the heat touches my lips, and daringly I let my tongue dart out, licking over its offally. A slight gasp escapes her before her soft hand comes up, resting on my face, not even covering half the surface, and she tries to push me away. Erratic giggles escaping her, the one sound that could make all my troubles, all my worries float away. Just one giggle, just one laugh, just one reassurance that she was happy and I was at peace. Her melodic giggles make my lips curve up automatically. She wipes at her cheek with the back of her small delicate hand. "Dad puppy," she says, scolding lie, and I snap my teeth at her, earning myself another heart-throbbing giggle. I'd be anything she wanted, anything she requested, anything she demanded. Before her, the most powerful wolf was a little puppy, absolutely powerless, absolutely defenseless against her charms, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I yank her to my chest, and she collides into me, her eyes widening as she looks up at me. Before they narrow, "You went too far away." I mumble in my defense, and she looks absolutely bewildered. "I'm in your lap, you kind nut," she says, evoking a light chuckle from me. Her curses were adorable. "Yes, well, you started leaning away, and that's not right," I explain, making her lips curve down, and she shakes her head at me, making TSK sounds with her tongue. But her eyes are playful. Absolutely awesome, absolutely entranced by the seal of her little pink tongue inside of her parted lips. I lean forward, pressing my lips to hers, my tongue going to meet hers, and I lick over it gently. She should have known better than to tempt the wolf. She bites down on my tongue very gently, making a growl rumble through my chest as my stomach tightens, putting away from her lips. I trail kisses all over her face, mumbling professions of love in between kisses, wanting desperately to hear that laugh again, breath filling my lungs as I do. "I could just eat you up," I mumble to her, and she furrows her brows at me. "That's the tiniest bit strange. You need to control your cannibalistic urges, she says scoldingly, wagging her finger at me, and I snap my teeth at its murking. Why, you really like doing that whole teeth snapping thing, don't you? She mumbles under her breath. Well, let's see how you like it. She mumbles, making my brows furrow before they shoot up as she leans forward, biting the conjunctune of my neck and collarbone. I growl that moan escaping me as I grip her hips tightly, eros fighting to come out. My hands run over her soft curves over the thin long sleeve she'd adorned, the deep navy color of it beautiful against her pale skin and chocolate waves. My head falls backwards as she licks over the skin she'd so deliciously bit into, my chest tightening as I tried to pull her in closer to me, careful not to hurt her. My fingers weave into her chocolate waves as she begins sucking on the skin, and I bite into my lip trying to hold back the growl that fights to break free. My little angel was also a vixen. Regrettably, she pulls away far too soon, pressing a soft kiss to the skin, and a quiet moan escapes me, making her cheeks flush scarlet. My eyelids droop in the arousing haze Shess put me in, and I run the back of my fingers over the blush, pressing my lips to her forehead. I rest my hand on the back of her head, guiding it to rest on my chest. A little nap was in order. We were both exhausted, and my sweet little angel hadn't been getting an adequate amount of sleep since the day her parents had left. I rest my eyes shut, inhaling her sweet scent deeply. It was absolutely tantalizing. I was sure that even amidst of billions of people I could pick it out, for surely nothing else could possibly smell so alluringly sweet. A soft gasp lifts me from my tired stupor, and I pop an eyelid open, looking down at her. Her eyes are wide as she stares at my neck, before looking up at me. I left a purplish mark. She squeaks out, and the corner of my lip tugs up. I love bearing your mark, angel. Feel free to leave another one. You have my consent. You can pounce and mark me whenever and wherever you'd like. I whisper into her ear, licking over it as I pull back, and she stares at me wide-eyed, flushing. I'll keep that in mind, she says, making me chuckle. Adorable. I love you. I whisper to her. I love you too. She whispers back, her words resounding in the silence of the library, every echo of it ringing within me. Chapter 30. Tomorrow. A deep velvety voice calls out, and I look up from the book I was holding, looking up at him completely confused, my head still slightly fuzzy from the book, as I try to figure out where I was. Would you like a glass of milk? Love? Alaricus asks, his honey-colored eyes twinkling with poorly disguised amusement. Yeah, just get me a glass if you're having one, I say dismissively, curling back up and hunching closer to my book again. He sighs deeply, mumbling something under his breath that sounds suspiciously like the woes of being in love with a bookworm. I give him the stink eye quickly from atop the corner of my book, and he chuckles silently to himself. Don't you have some sort of paperwork or something to do? You're always lounging around here, I ask mockingly, not even looking away from the book. A gasp rings out, followed by a shrill squeak that unfortunately comes out of me as large arms wrap around me, plucking me up from my dignified position in the armchair. Alaricus plops himself into my chair, placing me into his lap, his large arm wound around my waist, as I sit draped over him, my side cuddled into his warm chest. He leans in, biting down softly onto my neck. You love having me around, he growls out lustfully, and I gulp politely. He ignores my reaction, leaving soft bites all over the sensitive skin of my throat, causing me to arch my back. A quiet gasp falling from my lips. He bites a little harder on the side of my throat, immediately licking his tongue over it leisurely to soothe the sting, making me squirm in his arms. He flicks his tongue back and forth over the definite mark he'd created. Alaricus parts his plum lips, sucking on the skin he'd just bitten, and I throw my head back. I push him away suddenly, swinging myself around so that I straddle his lap. A soft swell spreads on his face as he looks up at me. His large, warm, slightly calloused hands trail softly over the arch of my back, stopping to clench on my waist as I tangle my hands in his silky dark locks, tugging his head so that he moves his face up and level to mine, making him release a low growl. A growl so raspy and deep in its sweet arousal that unthinkingly I lean towards him, crushing my lips to his. I move my lips against his, my body rocking ever so slightly into him, and he reciprocates, as if our kisses breathed some sort of lustful life into him, moving his lips against mine. He moves both his hands so they are low on my hips, his hold firm but gentle. His hips begin to rock under my own, eliciting a sharp gasp from me, his large hard bulge grounding into me, making my eyes fly open. And I look at him, my shock giving way to longing as my eyes meet his hooded, lustful, honey golden gaze. My head falls back, a low moan escaping my parted lips. But Alaricus doesn't allow for the room between us to last for long. His hands leave my hips, but his stay rocking against mine. And slowly mine begin to move on their own accord. Alaricus holds the back of my head, bringing me forth to meet his lips again. He nibbles on my bottom lip, gently waiting for my lips to part before he pushes his warm tongue in. It messages against mine gently. As they dance to their own rhythmic tune, Alaricus moves his arms to wrap them around me, until I feel completely surrounded by him, enveloped by his heat, submerged deeply within him. His scent all I could smell, his name all I could remember, his body all I could feel. A husky growled moan escapes him as I pull apart from his lips enough to take a deep breath, making my lips curve up. His lips seek mine again and I peck them, before moving down the strong curve of his jaw, to his shrunk palmed throat. I press open mouth kisses to it, licking over his smooth skin, before giving into temptation and biting down on its offty, and a broken groan escapes him at my actions. I love you. He pounces as I alternate between licking and sucking the skin, giving him my own little mark. Opening up the top few buttons of his shirt, I spread my hands over the wide expanse of his chest, my hands looking luminescent like pale, resting on his broad tan chest. I gaze up into Alaricus, eyes to see him looking at me through his dark and aroused honey eyes. Unable to break his gaze, I lean forward, pressing an open mouth kiss to his chest. His hips ground up hopelessly as he feels my hot mouth against his skin. I trail kisses all over his chest, taking my sweet time above the skin underneath, which I can hear his strong and steady heartbeat. I close my eyes as I hover over the strong rhythmic beat, wanting to memorize it. I love you too, I reply to him, pressing a soft kiss to his collarbone, before wrapping my arms around his neck and snuggling into his warmth. Do you still want the milk? He asks and I giggle. Sure, I say, pecking his lips deeply before getting off of his lap so that he can finally get to the kitchen and that glass of milk he's been contemplating having since dinner. He gets up, but I hook my fingers into the loop of his well-fitted pants, stopping him. Think twice before you call someone a bookworm next time, I say, looking up at him, my lips twisting up into a smirk as his eyes widen at my words. I pick up the book, settling back into the armchair. He opens and closes his mouth soundlessly for a moment before turning and walking out of the room a little unsurely. I sigh heavily. Having lost my focus and the novel far too great to not have my full attention, I set it down beside me. Getting up from my spot on the armchair, I make my way to the shelves, trailing my fingers over the covers of the historical section. I personally prefer fiction, but history had always intrigued me. I hadn't particularly enjoyed learning of werewolf history in the past, but perhaps now it would be different. I wanted to learn more about Alaricus. There were no significant records of him in most historical books, but surely his library had some. In classes he wasn't something the teachers had liked to discuss, perhaps due to the fact that he didn't live by the average pack lifestyle. Due to his strength, none of the discontented wolves were able to express their concerns. I grabbed one of the older-looking books, the title nothing I'd ever seen or heard of before. The descent of the primal era. Grabbing it out of its place on the shelf, I made my way carefully back to my armchair. Settling down, I placed the book in my lap, swiping my palm over the cover of the book, wiping off the light layer of dust that covers it. I open it carefully, the ancient paper fragile beneath my fingertips. The page is yellow, but otherwise in perfect condition. I skim my eyes over the subtitles of chapters, flipping through it distractedly. Flipping another page, my eyes narrow as I see the frayed remains of pages that have clearly been ripped from their rightful place. Flattening my lap, I flatten the ripped fragments of paper left, blinking in confusion as I see fragments of what would seem like Alaricus, names along with other words that I can't quite make out. I grabbed you some cookies as well, love. They're a fresh batch. They're training some new chefs. Alaricus says, walking back into the library. He sets the cookies and glasses of milk down on the table near the fireplace. Alaricus, what happened to this book? And a crease forms between his brows as he makes his way towards me, wrapping his arm around me to look over my shoulder as he sits on the arm of my chair. His face falls slightly, but other than that he seems to have no reaction. I'm not sure, he says, and I look at him raising a brow. Alaricus was overprotective of his books. It was unbelievable someone could have ripped some pages out. So it's a coincidence that the pages that mention you are ripped out. I heard you'd had all books mentioning you destroyed, but I didn't believe it. I had decided to completely ignore all the rumors I'd heard of him and learn about him through the best source. He himself. He looks at me quietly, not saying a word to affirm or cast aside my claims. Is this what Eros talks about? Me finding out something that'll make me leave you? Is that what's ripped out of the book? And he continues to stare at me in silence, not uttering a word, and I'm just about to give up when he gives me a small sharp nod in reply. His honey eyes completely closed off blank. But as I sit up on my hunches to get closer to him, nearly completely concealed within those eyes is a deep-set fear. He was absolutely terrified of something. Alaricus, there will always be this barrier between us unless you tell me. You know everything about me, and I wish to know everything about you. I say, and he licks his lips, avoiding meeting my gaze. If you won't tell me, I'll just ask Eros during the next full moon. Going to sit up, but Alaricus grabs onto my forearm, gently pushing me to sit back down. I'd rather you hear it from me, he says solemnly, and I nod. Alaricus turns away, and I look up in confusion. Had he changed his mind that fast? But then he grabs the armchair that sits across the table, dragging it so it rests right before the one I'm perched on. Alaricus finally looks up, and a silent gasp falls from my parted lips as I see his honey eyes bloodshot and watery. I shoot forward to the edge of the large armchair, grasping his face within my hands. I raise it, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. I pull away from him, our lips only a breath away, as I rest my forehead against his. What's wrong? I breathe softly. You gotta leave me once you find out what I've done, he says softly, his voice cracking. I shake my head. I'm never gonna leave you. I love you, Alaricus. I just want to know every part of you. I believe you're a good man. From what I know, from what I've seen, you are a good man. And I love you for it. No matter what you tell me, I'll always love you. I know your past is dark, and that's okay. I won't leave you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I tell him, and he looks up, trying to give me a small smile, but still he looks hopeless. Centuries ago, Werewolf didn't rule. I'm sure you know that, though. But the times I was raised in were times before the humans ruled too. Like there is no trace of my beginnings in history. There is also none of these creatures that ruled the earth then. Do you know what python sounds are? Alaricus asks, and I shake my head. They're supposedly what you'd think of to be a witch, for lack of a better description, but they were far more powerful and respected. They ruled the very earth, living in tribes, so to speak. I'm not a natural-born werewolf. I was born a human, to a human mother and father. But my mother wasn't the average woman. She was the concubine of the king of our people. To python is Sam's. The power is all in the mind. So, unlike werewolves where men are stronger, the women were stronger. Unlike the werewolves where both genders can be alphas, only female python Sams were the rulers. The males didn't have even nearly as much power. It had always been that way. Alaricus says, looking to me to ensure I was keeping up with him. The queen was one of the most powerful, but her downfall was the king. She was completely in love with him. And he was infatuated with my mother. All women in our kingdom had light-colored hair, brightly colored eyes. But my mother, the daughter of a Middle Eastern woman and a peasant from our tribe, had gotten her mother's looks and her father's tan skin. She was beautiful, and the king thought so too. He bought her forcefully from her parents. A dark flower in his garden of light, he'd called her. His eyes darken as he speaks. This infatuation of the king to his mother able to anger him even years after. I listen intently, entranced by every word he speaks. Finally seeing this other part of Alaricus was something I'd always wanted but feared I'd never get.